All right, as we as we move on, we really talked about our private sort of victory in the first part of this is who are we as a person? And how do we reflect? How do we set our own priorities? And we, by setting our standards, make a difference, not only standing by our own, but other people as they see us. Well, now we're going to move on to what we do, what I call in the public victory. We'll skip by this, which is supposed to be right before the break. And think, now, this is where, again, I have a difference, is in the typical organization. You follow the book and you go, think, win-win, seek to understand, and then synergize and handle all the qualities of staying sharp so you can execute. And one of the discussions that I'd had, which was that whole chicken or the egg, discussion, was, well, how do you have the idea of think win-win, where it works for me and works for you, before you actually have seek to understand? How do I know what win means if I haven't taken the time to understand how you feel about something or you feel about something? It struck me as kind of backwards. And I never did chat about this with Stephen Covey. I've seen him speak, but I've never actually met the guy. But I did ask his son about this. And as I mentioned before, they said, well, so many organizations in so many places, people were so stuck on their own agendas, afraid to participate, worried about what they do, how are they going to position themselves, that you really couldn't do the seek to understand until you actually got the concept that you should do something that's beneficial for everybody. And I thought, that is really sad. But that's how a lot of the world operates. And I probably feel fortunate at your age, you probably haven't had a lot of experience with it. By the time you're at my age, you'll have seen enough. It's awful. It's really awful. So the normal sequence that they would have is you think win-win. They actually get people in the right mindset. Then they go seek to understand. Then we go, how do we put it all together? Followed by the kinds of things, renewal. You talk about exercise, diet, sleep, the things. It doesn't matter how well organized you are if you're tired, unfit, and you can't do it. If you run out of gas at 3 p.m, you're not going to be able to do the things you want to do. And so in effect, and this one is really important. I got it circled here. We'll get to it tomorrow. But it's the one thing, if you don't take care of yourself, you won't have the strength to do everything else. And what do we do when we prioritize? We tend to put ourselves at the bottom of the list. And you can't. You have to love yourself the way God loves you. It says, love your neighbors, you love yourself. Well, if you don't love yourself, it's hard to understand loving your neighbors. You got to put yourself up there. So I'm switching the order around because I think if we're going to have a conversation where I want to understand how to make everything we do good for all, then I have to take the time to listen. And if there's one habit in here, of all the 1 habits that I've said are the most important, this is really the one you've probably heard me say is the most important consistently, and that's really seeking to be understood. Empathetic, good listening. And being a good listener is not only your foundation for earning trust from others, when, as you've pointed out, you're respectful, loyal, you listen, you take the time to understand what somebody else is feeling, and your ability to communicate with them further, trust, share the wisdom you have, will go 100 times over. If you start trying with the book, you'll hit society's wall, splat. When someone trusts you, they will seek it out. They will look for it. And the fastest way to earn that is to set your own ego aside, set your own person aside, and listen. And really listen. This is a really, really important thing. So as I've asked several times, how many of us have thought to answer before someone's finished speaking? Respond.
Or worse, finish their sentence.
Yeah, or they, oh my gosh, yes, finish the sentence they have, because you want to finish their sentence because you got to get in your sentence. Woo-hoo-hoo. Boy, that's a one way to say, you're really important to me. You're so important, I'm going to talk for you and then talk for me too. Woo. That's right up there with heads I win, tails you lose. And then I hear, everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to anger. All right, I've only quoted that Bible passage about 5 times. All right, everybody know which one it is? James 1:19. Yes. All right. Glad that somebody remembered it was James. And so in effect, this is a charge we have, but as practical application, our own natures tend to fight with that because we're prideful. You know, we've got our opinions. We get triggered by what other people say or do, so we want to respond to them. And the trick is to really back that down. I did leave a book here the other day. I'll leave it if anyone wants to look at it, how to listen. You know, so people will talk. I always say the easiest thing is say, tell me more. We'll get into that in a moment. But my thing is really the first critical for us, because I'm going to take it for granted, even though we're going to touch on it, that each of you here really do understand the idea of what we do with others should be beneficial for everybody. That you're not full of all the hidden agendas of how can I listen to you and then use it to stab you in the back so I get your job. I have witnessed that in action. I actually left a large company and went somewhere else because that was standard procedure in their management. And I said, I will not be part of an organization that operates this way, period. So what difference does it make? You're on the practitioner side. I said, well, if that's the way your ethics operate, I'm not going to operate here. So I picked up my 5 team members and our $500 million we managed, and we went somewhere else. And that's because I would not deal with people who did not see the world that way. So as we go, we have an attitude, which I'm going to presume you have, and then the skill is to be understood. You synergize it together, built on your character. So let's think about that habit 5. Number 1, respect. You think, well, that's easy, I respect. When you think of someone you truly respect, you innately get quiet and listen to them. You probably afford that, whether we all earn it or not, to the people who stand up here. Okay, we're older than you guys, we're teachers, we're something. So therefore, you innately grant us that. It's not something you often do innately with a coworker or a peer. And so in effect, when they're your equal per se, and you don't have that built in you, it doesn't come natural. You don't redo it. You tend to, like you said, finish sentences, think about what you're going to answer before they're done talking. It's our nature, all right? And depending on how many siblings you have, you know, my wife grew up in a family of 7. I gather that whatever dynamic went on between all of them as kids, I can't even comprehend all the figuring out where the boys would tell the little girls to look that way while they took the food off their plate or whatever else.
No way to speak without interrupting.
Without interrupting. You know, with the desire of mutual understanding, not dominance. We are wired in the Western world to own, operate, and dominate. Mutual understanding is the goal of listening. Doesn't mean you have to agree. It just means you have to understand. I can disagree with non-faith-based people on several issues, but I understand where they're coming from. I don't agree with it, but if I'm going to associate with them, I have to understand how they think about it. And then with empathy, where you come in with that open heart and the courage to not change who you are while you're doing it. So it's a neat balance, but when you get there, it's a way to break through. Really developing then those listening skills. And when you're working with others, and particularly when you want to earn that trust so they can share in the joy you do, it's that empathetic listening which will open a door faster than any other door you will have. All right? This is sort of the typical, anybody know anybody who's, well, I need to make sure people understand my point of view. All right? Anybody know anybody who's kind of like that? You get in a group and boy, their point of view is the point of view. Only 1 or 2 hands went up. Man, you guys are lucky. Wait till you get in the work world. All right? The real thing is, you know, I'll have greater influence and understanding if I understand them first. Understanding takes you to a lifetime of communication. Dominance gets you through whatever that moment is, and then you just start right back over at 0 again because there's no understanding between them. Remember what I said earlier about sometimes things that look hard actually make it all easy, and some things that are easy then end up making it long-term hard. If you take the time to listen and understand that extra effort, which sometimes is a little harder, then once you come to that understanding and you learn to communicate well, everything else will be easier. If you use the dominance technique, which is very common in business work environments, I've seen it even in large church committees where somebody just dominates a meeting. Well, you might get through the meeting, but you didn't resolve anything. Nobody understood anything. So you end up just right in the same dominance cycle next week. So it might be easy not to say anything. It might be easy to go along, but then you just end up with the same mess week after week after month after month. Take the time here, everything runs smoothly. All right, and once you learn, it really does change how you see things. Here's, I think, a very good example of that.
Ask me, what do you see? I see a beautiful river. Do you see any fish? No. Then he told me to put on a pair of polarized sunglasses. Suddenly, everything looked dramatically different. I could see through the water, and I could see fish, a lot of fish. Suddenly, I saw enormous possibilities that I had not seen before. The fish were there all along, but until I put on the glasses, they were hidden.
That little parable is such a natural part of the dynamic. If we don't understand something, we don't know it's there. And in effect, they say, well, ignorance is bliss. No, ignorance means you don't have the information you need to make a good decision. I mean, I don't know who came up with that line, but it's a really dumb line. And so, in effect, what we want to do is be able to see all there is to see. People have asked me, why is it that I have these little toys on every desk I have and everywhere I've been? I have one in my RV, I have one in my Cincinnati home office, my home office, our place, every place I go. Here in Kauai, I have a Rubik's Cube.
Do you fidget?
Good answer, but not the right one. The reason is if I didn't take the time to listen and explore and whatever, I would think I had a yellow cube. In fact, I don't have a yellow cube. I have one that's blue, orange, white, and green. But the only way I can know that is if I take the time, yes, to look at all sides. This is a reminder to me that if I don't take the time to listen and explore, I may think I have an orange cube because I only see one perspective, whatever first sight I have. I cannot presume that the first thing I get, my first impression, is all there is to know. I want to take the time. I also use, this is a good example, one of the things that I'm not a big fan of is New Testament legalism, where somebody cherry picks one sentence and then decides that's it. That's looking at the Rubik's Cube and going, just looking at this one little corner up here and deciding the whole thing is this corner. No, it's not. So I keep these as a reminder to me. Just like I have the Bible from World War II, just like else, this is a reminder that says, no, always take the time when something's before you to understand. I would never be able to solve this if all I did was think it was a blue cube. The only way I will solve this puzzle, and I'm not mixing it up again because I have forgotten how to unsolve them, I would think it was one color. And this is my trigger to me to always listen. I've had that for many years. I added the tattoo I showed you after my nephew committed suicide right around his 21st birthday as a reminder to go even deeper on that. And so in effect, what do we get blinded by? Our own ambitions, worrying about the time. Well, we got to get this quick. Well, if you don't have time to listen to somebody, identify we don't have time to really understand and make more time later. Stresses, I don't know how many of you, but have you ever been in a conversation where someone's talking to you in your mind, all of a sudden you realize you're thinking about something else? And your total listening capacity is 0. What was their last sentence? I don't know. I was thinking about what I'm going to be doing at 4 o'clock this afternoon. Our own preconceptions. This one's a killer. Preconceived notions. Angst we brought with us. I brought some stress with me, and that impeded my way to do it. The limits we place on ourselves. We need to fight our own natures of how we were wired. We've got that wonderful quality of pride, You know, gee, I'm more important. My idea is better. I need to answer you. You want to blow up your own ability to listen. Have pride be a motivator instead of humility. With humility, and you can get these away, and you clear your head. That's so important why you have periods of rest, reflection in your day, because stress accumulates. So you can have a nutty couple of days, but if you go without reflection time, without rest time, without some exercise or something to relieve that stress, you're going to build up so much in time that you will become your own worst enemy at this. And then the glare on the river becomes permanent instead of something that we are aware that there's a glare on that river, and that we must make sure that we always find the glasses to see through it. And that really comes from opening your heart, taking a deep breath, and listening. Listening, listening, and listening. And so I'd say I'm going to challenge you guys. You know, I'm not going to do it like my older groups. I put them on the spot. Take a moment and reflect on yourself. Write down what gets in the way of listening. What is your own internally imposed enemy? You know, what should we be praying for so I can listen better? Let's take a minute and just reflect on that. All right, if this was the 3-day course, we'd be spending half an hour on this kind of stuff. But we don't have 3 days of 8 hours a day. I'm not sure you'd want to put up with me for 8 hours a day. But I hope in looking at that, you identify, okay, if I can see this is what gets in the way, once you became aware of it and you wrote it down, the chances of you all of a sudden having it come back to you when you're trying to listen, and all of a sudden you go, oh yeah, this is my hurdle. I need to help get through this so I can really listen. When you write it down and you reflect on it, you pray on it, your chances of working through it go through the roof. Through the roof. We all have barriers. And I've worked really hard. If I had to say, this is probably my biggest challenge of all, is to really learn to listen. And it's not just listen, it's, the first thing you have to understand what it is, and then do your own evaluation, not what the group says. You think, okay, how do I think about this? If someone's asking for advice or the like, who am I going to be as that I advise it? We have a great roadmap, and then kind of interpret all the pieces to put together to say, okay, how does it take us forward? I've been leading financial management teams for 44 years. Hard to believe it's been that long. I don't think there's anybody in the room as old as I've been doing what I do for a living. Maybe you guys are most of you are half of the time that I was doing for a living. But I always had really good relationships with the team members we had, really good cohesion and the like, and good ways of handling things. And one of the things is I praise publicly and correct privately, number one. But two, people say, well, when you have difficulties, somehow you always get the teams figured out, and the people who are fit come back on board, and those will go find a new job, and everyone seems to do it so well. Well, there's a biblical thing for that. It's if you have an issue, you sit down with one or two people and you talk about them. And if that doesn't work, you bring in your little group and talk about it. If that doesn't, you sit your community down and you address them, and if they can't at that point, then, well, they're not part of your group. But the Bible has a very nice sequence of events, and so when someone wasn't carrying their weight, you'd sit down and say, look, we're all working on these things together. You know, the delays are getting challenging because Caitlin and Jonesy and Barb are having to carry extra work. It's really not fair to them. And most of the time you go, okay, I'll live up to that. Well, if they don't, then you bring in a couple more. And by the time the whole group is sitting there, then they go, well, either you can step up and be part of the family, or maybe this isn't a great fit. And you do it with sincerity and kindness and approach of what we're going to do for all of us. Then generally I found, at least in my 44 years, either people lived up and said, you know what, I do want to be part of it, or you're right, it's not a good fit. Great, then let's help you find a fit that works for you. And it's much better to do it from being employed, so let's work together to make something that works for everybody. And boom, you're not creating files to fire people and all this kind of stuff. You know, and where'd I get that method? I got it right out of the Bible. Oh, how does that work so well? Well, I had a good guidebook. Is it in HR somewhere? Where? No, it's in a different HR book. Much better one. Much, much better. But that's where, you know, when you bring the pieces together, you listen, you understand, you bring everyone, it just is fantastic. So we practice empathetic listening, and we respectfully, once we're done, and I emphasize respectively seek to be understood. If someone really pours out their heart to you, and you've listened and you nod and they go, oh, you know, tell me, if you have a differing opinion, fine, share it. But you share it back in a respectful, conscientious, and caring way. You know, I have a very dear friend I grew up with we went to, you know, I think we went to kindergarten together. We've been friends for 60 years. Her family and mine are connected back to the beginning of the last century. My grandfather dated her grandmother in like 1904, we found out. You know, talk about a wacko small connection. She has a different view than I do about life. And it's very different. She has come very much to terms to very respect and admire my view. I don't like hers, but I understand where she's coming from. But I was able to bridge that gap because after listening to her, I respectfully gave her mine and my strength for it. And all of a sudden, a barrier to our extended friendship got smaller because she didn't see me as an enemy. She respected it. And hopefully one day she'll come around on it. I'd love it. Not holding my breath, but I'm working on it. And the like. And so our intent is to listen to be understood. And then the skill is reflecting those feelings back so they know you really get it. Take the time to feel it and reflect it back again. This thing's not going to fall over, is it? No, okay, good. And that makes a huge difference. So we focus on our intent. Don't worry about the correct response, and don't be afraid of silence. Somehow we're afraid to be silent. What's wrong with silence when you're trying to listen? And let it stay let it stay that way. You know, and I always ask that people, what?
Wait. I want to.
Oh, wait a minute, let me back up. You know, and when you ask the clarifying questions, there's one that I found works, you know, stay on the subject, you know, the person brought in. You know, you don't try to switch it to yours again, you're trying to help understand. And so you think of sample question, can you tell me more about that? When you say this, explain to me what you mean by that. Can you help me understand what you mean when you say this? I feel part of it, but I really don't get it all. And there are times you will get folks with logic that you will just scratch your head and go, this makes no sense at all to me. You don't say, you know, that's totally illogical, or that's the dumbest thing I've heard this week. That's not a good way to create empathy. But saying, help me understand this. Walk me through this again. And I say that all the time. Will you walk me through that again? I don't quite get it. And then I get it explained to me, and sometimes sometimes what people will rationalize as good is absolutely nuts. But either way, I have found this one sentence right there. Can you tell me more? Tell me more. Just a simple, tell me more, 3 words. When somebody's get something out and you can tell that they have that feeling, they've got some trials. Sometimes when you start a conversation in one place, when people start to trust you, it'll all of a sudden go somewhere else. You're talking about planning something at school, and all of a sudden, when they get really comfortable talking with you, they switch over and they're telling you about a family problem or an interactive problem or something that's going on somewhere else, or a teacher they don't get along with. You're thinking, well, I thought we were doing this, but they needed someone to talk to, and that barrier of trust that they have with others came good to you. The way you get more is just simple. These 3 words in the middle right here. Tell me more. You learn those, and that will be that piece that goes all the way together. I cannot impress enough the importance then of once you get on the other side, you very calmly, with the intent of being understood, but very respectfully, very calmly, and I forget who's sitting over here made the point with no judgment. It is not our job to judge. And again, if you want to shut down the trust, throw a little judgment in there. Everyone assumes, oh, you're Christian, you must be judging me. Oh, you're a Christian, therefore you're looking down at me. No, I'm here to listen. I'm here to help. I'm here to care. It's not our job to judge. We get branded with it, and there are those that do. And in the modern media, what do you figure? I mean, how many people identify as Christian in this country? It's down, but it's still 250 million. They'll find the lunatic that proclaims something awful, and they'll put that on TV and decide that reflects the other 249,999, 249 million is somehow assigned to that. I call it the tyranny of the one, because they'll find the one, they put it on TV, and then, boy, we get branded. So we want to avoid that. So our skill then, based on my experience, I think we should maybe think about it this way. Well, you could be right. Let's think about it this way. And so you always reflect, you never demean what somebody says to you. No matter how nutty it is, you don't demean it. You might think, well, I think I get what you're talking about. What if we think about it? What about this way of kind of thinking about it? But you don't demean somebody, and you will find sometimes with empathetic listening, you will get crises or crazy things sent to you that are just out of here. And so when you talk back again, part of it is using the word I with it, because you want to have what you believe, but you don't want to impose, well, you think this, you think that. No, we don't want to go there. And so, I'd like to, you could be right, however, let's think about it this way. That sounds interesting. And if it's really sometimes tough, can we get back to that later? Sometimes if you want reflection time, ask for it. Don't worry about having to solve everything at once. But sometimes you may get presented with something where, okay, this person needs some good advice, but I don't have it right now. I need to think about this, pray on it, read something about it, find things to help them out elsewhere. This comes then with the idea in that communication, there's an idea of an emotional bank account. We're in dealing with people, how you earn it. I'm going to, because of time, but remember these different character qualities. Every time that you demonstrate respect to someone, listen carefully to hear them. Deliver on the promise that you made. Every time that you work with somebody about keeping commitments, that you do this, the person who receives it is going to then, in effect, trust or feel more comfortable with you. in a whole world where everything's torn down. I mean, that silly smartphone you got on the social media, what is it that everybody's grandmother that mine has climbed Kilimanjaro, and I have perfect siblings and I always live a wonderful life? Well, we don't. We have great days and lousy days, despite what that thing's trying to tell us. And so in effect, this is messing it up, but every time you show one of these qualities, that's like a deposit in your relationship. It's a positive deposit, not a withdrawal. The more deposits you have in there, the more trust you carry, the more communication you're going to have, the better you can help and serve each other in the things you want to do, and the better opportunities you're going to have to share the word that you do. So I'm going to throw it out for tonight. We could talk about this, is that, a challenge for empathetic listening. To say, maybe some of you are really good at it, maybe you're not. Maybe you think, I don't want to try this. But somewhere between today and tomorrow, if you're up to it, try truly listening maybe to someone you haven't had that conversation. There's some people in here you probably, oh yeah, well, roommates were great. I could listen to them all day long. Maybe pick somebody you haven't talked to all the time and try to get to know them better, to really listen. And try that and see how it feels different, particularly with maybe someone you haven't done that with, or maybe you feel a barrier to. And I think you would find it very, very comforting. And so that really, see up wrong one. So that, I don't know what assignments you get. I haven't given you really any official written assignments or anything, although I'd hope I saw a whole lot of the frameworks and my original mission statement scattered around. The wind got a hold of them. If you see that of value, I'd hope you'd keep the framework. If for no other reason, as your life gets more complicated, if you ever remember it, it will help you with these different things. So as we wrap up listening, I want to take a moment, and I'm not, again, want to put anybody on the spot, and maybe hear from some people who haven't been quite as vocal, to share what you found when you do take the time to really listen to somebody. How does that change how you and the other person feel about each other? How do you feel at the end of a really good conversation, a good, trusted conversation? And it's not a trick question. There's no right answer. I'm not a professor grading papers. There is not that. I gotta believe some of you in here have had really good conversations.
As far as conversations, just listening, usually people feel a lot more valued. You just really listen and understand what they're saying and nod their head and kind of just take in what their action's saying. Both sides will feel a lot valued, especially if you don't. I have a person back at home. Sometimes they'll just cut you off, and so that kind of demoralizes you a little bit. And hey, what's your problem? Type thing. And it loosen your head. But so when you take the time to just really listen, or just when you're speaking out your heart for something, lots of times people just feel a lot more valued. So I always try to take the time to listen to people.
So you feel that they value you, and you feel closer, more valuable with them, all around. That's a great observation.
I'd say overall just calm down.
Calm down. The whole stress of communication just goes. Yeah. Sometimes starting a conversation is hard, and somehow later you wonder, why was it hard to get this started? Anybody ever experienced that? I certainly have. You think, how am I going to approach talking to somebody? Then you get to talking and going and think, what was I thinking? Once you got past that barrier. Yeah, you want to share something? Did I see a hand over here past?
Usually you have those kind of conversations, feel connected.
That's a one, yeah, when you feel that connection. Anybody notice when you get that connection, how the barriers just kind of go, when you build that connection and you develop that sense of trust, and each of you earn it by listening and feeling for and with each other, yeah, the barriers just go ka-funk. And it allows a whole nother level of how you communicate. And that kind of understanding is really what changes the entire dynamic of everything you're in. And as I had mentioned in some of the previous things, when you're being proactive, when you proactively listen, you can change the tenor of an entire organization, an entire group effort. By being that good listener, when somebody's jabbering, I don't know, you ever been in a group where one person dominates the whole thing and every time somebody starts talking, somebody else, blah, blah, blah. You be the one to say, can you give it a moment? Let's hear what Rebecca has to say. Let's hear what Jim has to say. And then be the last one to speak. You will change the entire dynamic. The next time you get together, everyone's going to take their time. They're going to feel comfortable. The entire world will change when you make even just one good connection. That's a really good observation. So as those barriers goes down, then again, and I hate to keep repeating this, but I have this little mission thing that I like to adhere to. When those barriers are down and people sincerely ask, then the ability to bring your faith in becomes 100 times easier. As I say, one of my dearest friends in the world has some extremely different views than mine. I'm very much a life guy. You probably could figure that out. It's a safe guess. All right. But then when there was a challenge and her husband had pancreatic cancer and it really got tough, let's pray together over it. We prayed together. All right, maybe she isn't as far as I want, but I got, that wouldn't have happened had I not broken the communication, had I not brought that level of trust in. I'm going to get her all the way around? I don't know, but you know what? I'm working on it. And I was able to break the barrier with really good understanding. And then when the crisis hit, pray together. Maybe in age, I can bring her to the light. That would be awesome. But it started with breaking barriers where we had serious differences and had to get those out of the way first. And then once that understanding was done, then I could go forward. Made the whole world a difference. Any other insights on when you listen, particularly maybe with people that you weren't comfortable talking to and then all of a sudden you did, and you had that woo moment? I hope so. I've had plenty in my life, and I've had more practice. I've had a few more days than you guys. But any of you have any further thoughts on that? Nope. No thoughts in the room?
Clears the air.
Does clear the air. It's those sugars you gave everybody. Now I got the sugar crash going. All right, well, it's about 4 minutes to the end of showtime. So what we'll do is, I think we'll wrap up here. I'll talk about what we're going to, we have a couple, what would have been day 4, part 1, 2, 3. We'll run through tomorrow on each of the hours. And then depending on what happens with the schedule, I will, either in one of the hours on Friday afternoon or Saturday, I would like to pick your brains because I have never taught this content to students before. I was thinking every other audience I've had has been professionals, and when I do church leaderships groups, probably the youngest is 25 or 30. Most of them are between 30 and 60, 40 and 65. So there's a certain degree of, when I talk about the complexity, almost all of them have families, have kids, have multiple things. And so I want to understand if this content is resonating with you, or you think maybe here are different ways to look at it. So I'm going to throw it out now that either Friday afternoon or Saturday afternoon, if Rick gives it to me, I would like to hear from you, because if I'm going to retool this, which I am going to do, I want to retool it in a way that if I have this privilege again, here or elsewhere, I do it in a way that makes the most sense. This isn't a profession. There's no check involved here. I'm doing this because I want to share with you, so hopefully your future lives will be better, more peaceful, more calm, full of more joy, less stress, and walking in the light in ways that just makes every day a great day. I mean, you guys got a lot of years in front of you. I want you to have great days every single day. So that's the only reason I'm here. And so as I share these different disciplines, I want to make sure it's presented in a way that actually makes sense. And if it makes sense, great. But if it doesn't, I need to hear that. Remember that whole straight talk thing about hearing what you need to hear. I want to hear what I need to hear. So I'm going to lay the challenge out to you that hopefully either Friday afternoon or Saturday, kind of whiz through sort of the, Gatling gun of, slides, but kind of whiz through the sections and help me understand how I can get better. That's a very important for me for my mission in sharing my experience onto others. And so with that, unless there's any other concluding comments on today, I think we have 32 minutes to lunch, and I got to go grab my wife and bring her back so she can be inspired by you guys again.